Hello and welcome back for another historic gameplay video. Today we're going to be playing Mono Blue Merfolk Tribal. The deck can be described as a tempo deck, can be described as mid-range. It really depends on what you're matching up against. At 1 mana we have a couple utility cards. Shoreline Scout can turn any card in her hand into a tropical island. And then each turn, if a Merfolk or island entered the battlefield, it gets +1/+0. This is mainly in here as a 1-drop that is fairly aggressive and can do a little bit of mana fixing, not necessarily for the colors, but if we keep a 1-lander, the scout can turn one of our creature cards into a land so that we can continue to play the game. Then Mistcaller, this is our graveyard hate of choice. We'll also get buffed by all of our lords if it's in a matchup where the graveyard hate is not needed. Also stops things like Collected Company and such, so it does have some utility against other decks as well. And then there are 2 copies of Mindspring Merfolk. For at least 2 mana, we're able to exhaust it. If we pay more, we can draw some cards. And then when we exhaust it, we also get to put a 1/1 counter on each Merfolk we control. Then the other 1-drops are all unblockable creatures, Mistcloaked Herald and Triton Shorestalker. Once they get pumped by our lords, then they can easily attack in for damage and eventually tempo our opponent out. For the lords in the deck, we have Vodalian Hexcatcher. It has flash and also lets us sacrifice a Merfolk to counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 1. Against many decks, this is backbreaking, especially if we already have a wide board. Very good against things like board wipes that are trying to play out on curve. Full playset of Master of the Pearl Trident also grants Island Walk. And then the full playset of Merrow Reejerey has the additional ability of tapping or untapping any permanent whenever we cast a Merfolk. This can be used to untap our own lands so we can play more Merfolk. It can be used to tap down blockers. And it can even be used to tap down our opponent's lands if we don't want any instant speed surprises. Then the remainder of the utility cards, a few copies of Tishana's Tidebinder, turning off activated abilities or countering a triggered ability. As a mono blue deck, we're running 4 copies of Harbinger of the Seas, trying to catch some of our opponent's greedy mana bases. And then we also have a few copies of Sylvan of Sea and Sky. Gets indestructible as long as we have 2 other Merfolk. And then whenever it attacks, we get to draw a card. And then this also grants other Merfolk we control Ward 1, which in conjunction with the Hexcatcher, taxes our opponent's mana even more. For the mana base, 13 islands, 1 Otawara, full playset of Cavern of Souls to stop our Merfolk from being countered. And then we also have 4 copies of Sink into Stupor as one of our few interactions. Actually, it might be the only interaction we have for cards that our opponent has already resolved onto the battlefield. And then if we have the Harbinger in play, this just acts as a normal island. We don't have to pay life to have it come in untapped. You might notice the art for this one has Lord of Atlantis on the box. However, when I was building the deck, noticed it was a mythic rare for some reason on Arena, and it's definitely not worth the mythic wildcards, so it didn't make the cut. But if you already have some in your collection, you could swap out 2 of the Mindspring Merfolk, and then if you want to go up to 4 copies, you could look at shaving 1 of the Mistcloaked Herald, Triton Stalker, or the Tidebinder to get in additional copies of the Lord. Last time I played Merfolk, we were playing Simic in best of 3, where the deck does quite well since you can board in a bunch of counter spells if needed. And then in the Simic colors, you also get things like Collected Company, which can really boost your onboard power and toughness. You know, if you're attacking with a bunch of weenie creatures, then you hit a couple lords, you can really add a lot of damage. So we'll be seeing in the games today if we feel that we don't quite have the firepower to beat our opponents before they're able to assemble their game plan. Other than that, I think it's going to be interesting to see if we have the right pieces at the right time, since the deck does have a lot of good interaction in it. However, it doesn't really have any type of cantrips, so you really need to have what you need when you need it. That being said, let's jump into gameplay and see how the deck feels. This hand looks good to me. Vault of Whispers. Not going to be the best Mistcaller deck necessarily. We'll start with the Herald. I think this is just going to be a race. Goblin Bombardment. Say Master of the Pearl Trident will at least survive. Hexcatcher would die to the bombardment, doesn't have any type of buff for itself. So I think that we're going to try to play out the Master first. Our opponent will unmistakably sacrifice the Miner. Pretty good combo with the bombardment and the Miner bringing itself back whenever you commit a crime. Gonna have to Tidebind the Goblin Bombardment. Hope they don't have any other type of removal in the deck, but I doubt it. So let's see. The Bloodghast can't block. We're going to play the Mistcaller out first. Try and bait them into using the bombardment, and then we can play the Hexcatcher. I guess it gets the immediate buff here. Question's going to be, do we play out the Hexcatcher here? And I think we are. And that's enough for our opponent to concede. Don't think this one is necessarily over. If we counter their removal spells, that's as good as the removal spell resolving. And they still had their engines online, at least for the time being.
I'm proud to announce a brand new channel, Mythic Gaming Unleashed. On this channel, we'll play new games, old games, and everything in between. So if that's your thing, I encourage you to hop on over and take a look after the video and let me know what games would you like to see played. Now, back to the action.
This is a 2-lander, looks fine to me. Mountain from our opponent. Just start on one of our creatures. They're all the same, so it doesn't matter. Now we see white mana. 2 basics as well, so Harbinger's not going to be the best. Well, that's not going to do much against our deck. We do have to bolt ourselves here. Play out the Master. Field of Ruin, so they are on a dedicated land destruction strategy. Takes out our Lord. Love to draw into a land here, but we miss. I think in that case we are going to play out both of our Heralds. Could be in a lot of trouble this turn if our opponent has a board wipe or 4 mana land destruction and we start missing our land drops. But luckily we have basics for days since we're mono blue. And it looks like they're going to be holding up a removal spell here. No play. We'll play out the Hexcatcher. Path to Exile. We'll try and counter. Cost us 2 creatures. Another Flage, another cheap removal spell, and we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Miss on the land again. We're going to play the 2-drop here. And another 1 mana removal spell. Now we are susceptible to board wipes. But we have mana for next turn. How many do we have left? 7 or 8? What does this do? They're also just going to be able to bring back Flage. It's going to be a problem. I think we need the Harbinger here then. So turn off Flage for next turn at least. Until they find another removal spell. And the Mistcaller is great as well. Let's start with Svelin. Play out the Mistcaller. Again, we're always going to be susceptible to a board wipe, so we can't really play around it too well. This is going to get their second mountain. No, it's another plains. Do they not have 2 mountains in the deck? Maybe this grabs a mountain. Negative. Alright, that was a great top deck. Means that we have good attacks with everything, except for the Mistcaller. And that's even better. Down to 5. Pass the turn. This is the last turn of the game, likely. And there's the concession. So, bad matchup for our opponent in the sense that we have so many basics. I think they needed to adjust their strategy a bit there. This hand is just okay. We don't have any lords to pump our squad. And I think we're going to start on the cavern here, named Merfolk. And then we're going to play the scout out first. Upgrade this island. Mono blue deck. Ornithopter. 1000 face ninja. Let's attack in first. Doubt they're going to be trading the ninja. And then we could play out the Mistcaller. Pass the turn. We'll let that go. They've replayed the Ornithopter, and they have an Outcast. Play out the island. Svelin, I guess, as good as any. And then this can't block either. We'll make them chump. In case they were going to sacrifice it to the scout. And they don't want to play with us anymore, even though they still had 3 enablers. So I think the Mistcaller might have been doing its job there, shutting down their ability for the card they really want to get in. This hand looks good. Similar to last games, we'll start with the Herald. Try and push damage. Tameo is going to be annoying.
Nothing like warm tea and a fascinating story.
Play out the Hexcatcher. Push some damage here. They Fatal Push. Do they have a second removal? They do. We're going to play out Svelin here over Tidebinder. They create another treasure. And then looks like they have ninjutsu. can't use the Tidebinder on Kaito during their turn, which is a bit annoying. We are going to attack Kaito down, draw a card. And our opponent already has their basic setup, so no point in playing out the Harbinger here. Thoughtseize. No. Now we will play out the Tidebinder. See if they have a counter spell. They do. So this is a matchup that we have very good cards against. We just didn't draw into any of them. They still go for the Harbinger. And they play out a blocker.
This is an interesting story.
They'll get a bit of selection here.
My eyes are as sharp as my sword.
Understandable on that. And then we will play out the Shoreline Scout. Send both at Kaito. Finally draw our Cavern.
I need more intel.
No need to play it out yet. See if we can't get them on the hook for another Thoughtseize. That's annoying. And they follow up with another Tameo here. They are down to 7 though. Quite a few cards in hand. This is going to get the Fatal Push, and there's no point in playing anymore. Not after the board wipe. First appearance of Mind Spring. We'll keep this. It has a good curve. I was going to say, we haven't played against any real combo yet today. Which, again, is probably the matchmaker, seeing how much interaction we have and just pairing us against more fair decks. And here we don't even get to see what our opponent's playing. This hand, not going to cut it. The curve's not right, and there's zero interaction for any type of deck. This one we'll give a try. Again, most likely an enchantment deck on our opponent's side. Nope. Gonna be tempo. And we draw into a 1-drop we can play out. Unfortunately, I haven't drawn into one of our lands that let us play around counterspells, so we're just going to go in for 1 here. If they tap out, we'll play out the Hexcatcher. Opponent's going to be on rogues, so they're going to be looking to mill us. Explains the crypt. Still have to worry about surgical extraction. Opponent attacks in. We would have liked that island. Suppose here we can play out the scout. Turn this other scout into a land. And then this gives island walk. So if they flash out that black one that has death touch, we don't have to worry about it. Looks like they didn't have anything right there. Drown in the lock. They'll have to be fine. The auto tapper tapped them out of blue. Yep, I was just say, so I fully expect the follow-up here. Tidebinder Could try and shut down the thief. I think we're just going to play out the Reejerey. Hit for 3. Our opponent is getting quite low on cards here. The downside of playing something like the Crypt is when you're in a matchup that it's not really useful against, then doesn't do much for your follow-up. And then here we'll start on the Master, untap a land. Attack in. And after no blocks, might as well tap down. Nah, it doesn't matter. All right, feel pretty good about our position here. Opponent might have been stuck on blue mana this game too. Hard to know. They did play the pathway out on black, but it looks like they don't have it. All right, so there you have the deck, and I have to say, probably did marginally better than I thought it was going to do. I fully expected many more matchups, such as Reanimator, where we'd be sitting there with a handful of Sure Stalkers and Heralds, and just wishing we had a Mistcaller. But for the most part, our cards seemed to line up pretty well, and I think we got to utilize pretty much all of them, with the exception of the Mind Spring, which we only drew into one time. The Hexcatcher, not the most dominating display today. Our opponents always seem to have enough mana up to pay for it, and we didn't have too wide of a board where it could really shut things down. A couple instances where the Island Walk came in handy. Harbinger Seas, able to lock down the mana in a couple games there. Svelin drew us a handful of cards, and Cavern, I believe, even protected our Merfolk from counters in a couple of those matchups. So everything was doing what it was supposed to be doing, and we did get a handful of wins. When it comes to the losses, again, you fully expect to lose to those decks. Elf deck is a much better mid-range deck than this one, and we don't have good interaction. And then decks that have a ton of removal spells in them, also going to be quite strong, especially if we're not able to counter the board wipes and such with the Hexcatcher. And obviously also 1-for-1 removal, very difficult for us to deal with, especially if they're able to take out our lords and leave us with some of the weaker creatures. But overall, not an embarrassing record. I do think Merfolk tends to be better in best of 3, where you can bring in counter spells as needed, but we still did quite well in the matches today. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay, and if you've tested out Lord of Atlantis on your own, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. How did he do? There's going to be a couple bonus games after the commentary here. Still having trouble with my microphone and audio cut out, so no commentary on those, but feel free to watch them if you're interested. And as always, I'd like to thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more content.